Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome back to the Slang of Ages podcast. I'm your host, Preston Frazier. And on this very special episode, which is the first episode of season 8, and coincidentally is the 100th episode of the podcast, I have my great friend Joe Williams to talk about my new book called Yes, Indeed, Tales of Yes without Jon Anderson. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing great. Very excited to start talking about your second book.
I appreciate you doing that. Like I mentioned, this is the 100th episode in the first season 8. You have been a guest on the podcast at least, I guess, 4 times or so. You've been there since the beginning. You've been a supporter of the podcast. You've been a great supporter of my first book, which was Toto, the band, not the dog. And you may not remember it, but you also came up with a title for the first book, Toto, the band, not the dog. So it's just great to have you back to talk about a band, which I love and you kind of like, and talk about the new book.
Yeah, so I do remember coming up with the title for your first book, and I'm kind of dismayed you did not take my suggestion of calling the second book Yes, the Band, Not the Dog. But I will forgive you for that because you have such a great title for your book, which is Yes, Indeed. Why did you choose to do a book about yes, first of all?
That's a good question. And a it was not a surety that I would do yes. I think the reason I decided to do a book about yes is because several years ago, I don't know, maybe it was 10 years ago, maybe more than that, you and I saw yes in Chicago, yes in Toto.
Yes.
So I thought that the combination of the Toto book and a Yes book would be great because yes, Toto was opening for Yes. We got to see him in Chicago. I also saw them that same year with Toto again, the same year on the same tour, but I saw them in Baltimore, Maryland. So I've been a fan of Yes for quite some time. Now I know in the book, I think it's in the Kit and Caboodle chapter, maybe one of the latter chapters of the book. I talk about the album, which is called God, I don't remember the name of the album now. Um, it's an album which features Billy Sherwood on guitar, and it's called Open Your Eyes. And even though it is in the book and features Jon Anderson, it's not really a Jon Anderson book. And that album for me was one of my favorite albums at the time. It's probably one of my favorite Yes albums today. But ever since I saw them in concert, and that was in Camden, New Jersey, with my brother, when they were doing a tour which had surround sound for the theater, I've been a fan of Yes. So I thought, yeah, Yes is one of my favorite bands. And we've talked about Yes during the podcast where I'm working Anthony Kay on talking about the drama album. So why not do a book about the band and it ties in to that Toto piece? I think also in the book I talk a little bit, and I'm being long-winded here, but I know in the book I talk a little bit about Billy Sherwood and his connection with Toto, how he had written some songs with David Page and Steve Porcaro, and is good friends with the members of Toto. So I thought it was a good connection after Toto to do Yes.
Yeah, I know this book is looking at the years of Yes without Jon Anderson, with it. Now, I usually consider Jon Anderson one of the more foundational members of Yes. So why did you choose to do a book that focuses on the non-Jon Anderson years?
You're right, Joe. Jon Anderson is absolutely one of the foundational members of Yes. He is a co-founder. He is one of three, no, sorry, one of four original members still alive. Peter Banks is the only one I believe. No, that's not true. Peter Banks and Chris Squire are the members who were original members who are no longer with us. But John was really the visionary early on, and the visionary for a lot of their great albums. That being said, the band has continued for almost 2 decades without Jon Anderson, producing some really good albums, which I talk about here. And then you have that weird album in the middle after Tormato and before 90215, where you have Drama, which is an album which didn't feature Jon Anderson It featured the great Trevor Horn on lead vocals and writing. And I thought it'd be good to talk about something which no other writers talked about. There are a number of great books on Yes. My friend from the Yes Music Podcast, Kevin Mulrine, released an album, a book early this year about Tales of Topographic Oceans, which is a great Yes album. There are a number. I interviewed Tim Morris a few months ago about his albums. He wrote a great book about Yes as well. So there are probably a handful of great Yes albums, and they all talk about that classic period of Yes. I didn't want to do that. And I didn't want to talk about 90215 because everybody talks about 90215. So this is something I thought it's a little niche for me. It's fun for me. That's why I decided to do it.
Although the sad part about not talking about 90215 is that you're leaving out my favorite Yes song, which is what?
Leave it.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
at least when I've gone to see Yes, which I think was twice, they have not played that song at all for me. So I feel deprived. Although, if you want to sing it now in its entirety for the podcast, I will sit and listen to you, Preston Fraser.
I would certainly sing it, but of course it would infringe on copyright and I'll be banned forever from whatever. So no, I'm not going to do that. But you're interesting because you did see Yes twice with me. I think Sasha and Venicio as well. And you saw two different versions of Yes. You probably don't remember, but you did.
I don't remember the differences in lineups for the two versions that we saw, although I am sure you will school me on the difference. Do you remember the difference between the two shows?
Yeah, we saw them at the House of Blues first. And that was actually for what album was that? It was for the album which had Benoit David and had Chris Squire in the band, still alive at the time. So that was fantastic. In fact, I probably have it here somewhere. Jeez, turn my back on the camera. But we saw them on yeah, the Fly From Here tour, which was we saw, like I said, House of Blues, small venue. And then the second time we saw them was with Toto, and that was in Chicago at whatever theater that is, near the water, near the lake.
The
And that was
Northerly
real
Island.
Northerly Island, which is a good venue to see a band. And we saw them for, I think it was a Heaven and Earth tour, or maybe before that. It was before Heaven and Earth. And at the time, Chris Squire had passed. That was the first tour after Chris Squire had passed. And that was also with John Davis. So you saw two different lead singers for Yes.
Yeah, but both are wonderful concerts, so they definitely do a great job live. Now, I know for the year kind of book, you're focusing on the non Jon Anderson years. How do you think musically they differ from the with Jon Anderson years and the post Jon Anderson era?
Good question. I interviewed John Anderson about it's probably now 8, 9 years ago about one of his solo albums. And one of the things that he said, which struck me and shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. I asked him about his album he had at the time, which I think called Anderson and Stoltz or something like that. An album he did with Reinhard Stoltz, who's a bass player and guitarist. Brilliant album. And I said, "Well, John, can you explain how this album is different from what you've done in the past or from Yes?" And he said, "Well, one thing is I'm always progressing. Progressive music is actually about progressing as an artist." I thought, well, that's kind of obvious, but it really wasn't to me at the time. Yes, music is supposed to move forward. You're not supposed to keep doing the same thing over and over again, have the same sound over and over again. And yes, throughout their history has really changed their sound and continued to progress. I remember another thing about that interview was John Anderson yelled at me because I asked a question. He said, "Well, don't ask the same damn question everyone else asked. Ask something different." And you wouldn't think John Anderson would yell, but he did. Anyway, that's why.
Doesn't he know that yelling at you is my job? He needs to find his own gig.
Oh, I got to find that tape and put it on YouTube because it was funny. It was a great interview. But the fact is, every album is different. Even the last two albums, where you have Mirror to the Sky, and you had, what was the one after that? Jesus Christ, I don't remember anything today. and the Quest, they have the same lineup, same producer, same musician, same orchestra, but they sound different. And that's one thing I like about Yes. It's always progressing. And I think with these albums I talk about, starting with Drama and ending with Mirror to the Sky, there's obvious progression. Doesn't always mean it's better than the prior album, but it means it's different.
That should be your next podcast, just a compilation of famous rock artists yelling at you. That would be my ideal one. I would listen to that over and over again.
But there have only been two that have yelled at me, and one I had to cut off real quick.
Who's the second one?
So I'm not going to mention his name, Dave Kirshner. Let's skip
now,
that there.
now, is your favorite Yes album of this post Anderson era, or is it in the with the Anderson era?
So that's an obvious question, Joe. And I don't have an answer to it. All right. Okay. My favorite Yes album is this era. I would say, as of today, we're recording this. My favorite Yes album is of this day, this era, and that would be Drama. I love Drama, and that is a great album from start to finish. It has so many great songs on it. The playing is it came out in 1980, so the playing isn't punk, obviously, but it is very aggressive. It is probably one of the most aggressive Yes albums. I just love everything about Drama, even Trevor Horn's vocals. And he's not a great vocalist, but he's a solid vocalist, and it's just a great album from start to finish. It has modern sounds from the 80s, which still sound contemporary. So Drama is my favorite. And then I would say from this era, there another great album, which is an album. It's from a page. And that's not an album. It's just an EP. It's just really what, five songs, I believe, and most of them written by Oliver Wakeman, who was kicked out of the band after it. But from a page is this great playing, great songs, great production by Oliver Wakeman.
Yeah, wonderful. And so, now, why do you think Yes has this enduring legacy? I suggest, predict that it'll probably be due to the fact that they're constantly progressing and constantly evolving their, sound. But for a band that is, I think what 7, 8 years ago was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, enshrining their kind of legacy. But how do you view them as a legacy band?
They have a great legacy because they have great songs. It's all about the songs. From the beginning, from their first album, when they had Peter Banks and Tony Kaye in the band, to their latest album, it's all about the songs. And even, I mean, there's some Yes albums I don't think are great from this period in my book. There's one in particular which isn't great. And then there are a few before, which I think Kevin Mulrine, the Yes to Music podcast, calls the main sequence of albums. There are a few albums which I don't think are great. Kevin may disagree with me, like Formato or Half of Tales of Topographic Oceans, or the first album called Yes, but they're good. So that's why they has such a great legacy. It's the songs, it's also the playing, and it's also, I guess, maybe the ruthlessness of the band itself. If they met a player who they thought wasn't, who was great and better than someone they had in the band, they got that player. Rick Wakeman replacing Tony Kaye. Uh, they always had a need, especially with Chris Squire was in the band, to move forward with the band. He was at the time the HR director. He found people, he got them in the band, he kept them motivated. So you have Steve Howe replacing Tony Peter Banks. You have Trevor Rabin replacing Steve Howe. You have Billy Sherwood coming in to help write and produce. That's why they've always been dynamic. They always put the music first above really ego, to help the band move forward. And that's what's really cemented their legacy. It's not hit songs, it's not videos. So they have some great hit songs. There's some great videos. It's about the music.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that they kind of, established their legacy without a lot of, radio friendly, pop type of hits other than maybe their 90215, which I always have a hard time saying that because I want to combine it with Beverly Hills 90210.
One oh
And
yes.
so whenever I pronounce the name of their album, it's always some weird kind of combination of that and Beverly Hills 90210. But they've kind of established their legacy without a lot of radio type of hits. Do you think that is like a purposeful decision from the band?
I think that's part of who they are. Their music requires going beyond the surface level. Sometimes that means going beyond 4.5 minutes. So you may have an album which you may have a song which is 15, 20 minutes. You may have a song which is 5 minutes, which is great, but their focus really is the song and not, oh, what can we get this on the radio? I think with 90215, and I don't want to talk too much about it because it's not really in the book, but that was a situation where the band had to produce something. They had to get some airplay. They had to sell some albums because at the time they recorded, they had no record label. They were recording it from their own money and their manager's money. So they had to have a hit. And they had a bunch of stuff on an album, which was mainly written by Rabin. And then the other members came in and contributed something to make it more prog and more yes. In fact, the album wasn't going to be called Yes in the first place. It was going to be called Cinema. Everyone knows that. It wasn't going to be called Yes. But when Anderson was asked back in, they decided, yeah, we'll call it Yes. For this chapter of Yes, well, with Drama, the first non-Anderson album, they were inspired by a lot of different things. As you know, in the 80s, 1980, the world was changing in terms of music. You had punk happening, new wave happening. You had all these new synthesizers coming in. And Yes was down to a three-piece band. It was just Chris Squire, Alan White, and Steve Howe. And they found these guys from the Buggles who had a very modern sound. And one guy, the lead singer, who could kind of sing like Jon Anderson. So bringing them in changed their sound dramatically. They also brought in a few partially completed songs, which they honed and made them into Yes songs. So you have in that album a combination of really great prog music, kind of touches of new wave. I mean, it's not just the drum sound, the synth sounds, the Fairlight synthesizer Jeff Downs was doing, all that stuff. It sounded like new wave. It was Cars like, it had a great feel to it. And the album, like I said, still sounds fresh. Then after that, when Jon Anderson was let go, kicked out, whatever you want to call it, and we got to what Fly From Here, again, they went back to Trevor Horn as producer and they had the core of the band still in place. They brought in a new singer who was in a cover band, Benoit David, and they had Oliver Wakeman in the band, who we saw. And they had the traditional Yes sound and some new touches. But when they did this album, they decided that Jeff Downs is a better fit, given that he had worked on some of the songs before, and they brought him back and kicked out Oliver Wakeman. Again, always progressing, changing the sound.
Yeah, I think one thing I learned from the book is that I didn't know about the link between the Buggles and Yes, so I thought that was very kind of interesting. And looking back, I can kind of see some of the sound, you know, um, influences, on some of that, work. Now, you've kind of alluded to the fact that Yes has gone through a lot of lineup changes throughout the years with members coming and going. What do you think is the definitive classic Yes lineup?
Okay, man, that's hard. I have seen Anderson, Rabin, Wakeman, ARW, and I didn't think it was that good. I didn't. I didn't think Anderson's voice was that great. I thought Trevor Rabin overplayed, though he is great on 90215, and he is great on his songs on Union, which I did mention in the book because they were kind of not Anderson songs. But I didn't like Big Generator, even though they had a big hit. I didn't think it was a great album. And I think the album Talk which was his last full Yes album. I thought Talk sounded horrible. It was very brash sound. The definitive lineup, and I love Billy Sherwood. He's a great bass player. He's a great guitarist. He's a great singer. He's a great writer. I love John Davison. He's a great singer. And I've seen Jon Anderson live solo before. I don't think I went with you though. And I wasn't that impressed. And again, I saw him with ARW. So that's a hard question, Joe. Damn it. I would say my favorite yes lineup would probably I don't know. I don't know, Joe. I would say probably the lineup with Ella White on drums, Chris Squire on bass. Um, I'm going to go with Jeff Downs on keyboard, Steve Howe on guitar, and I'll say John Davison for lead singer. John Davison, I've seen him live, I don't know, 15 times, and he always delivers live. He's always pitch perfect. He's enthusiastic. He loves yes music. He's singing a lot of those songs which he didn't write, which were written when he was a kid, and he does it convincingly. And that's
No.
heresy, I know.
Yes. Well, if you invite me to your podcast, you're going to get the hard hitting 60 minutes expose type of questions. So just be forewarned. Now, in terms of, the lineups, if you had to kind of, cherry pick across, or go through all their lineups that actually existed, what would be your kind of favorite lineup throughout the years of Yes?
Okay, so I will take. I'll start the drums, and yes, it's had three drummers. The first being the original drummer, Bill Bruford, who was an amazing drummer, and Bill quit to go to King Crimson. They picked up Alan White from John Lennon's band, the Plastic Ono band. And then when Alan White died, what was it, 2 years ago? They picked up Jay Shellen, who's a fantastic drummer in his own right. He's played with Billy Sherwood on a number of different projects. But for drums, I would pick Alan White. He could play. He used to be able to play anything. He could do jazz type things. He's a great rock drummer. He's rock salad. He's a great composer. He's also a great pianist. So he did an album with David Torn and what's the guy's name? The bald guy who saw him with Peter Gabriel. Levine. What's his name? First name Levine. Anyway, he did a trio album I think it's called Torn, Levine, and White. Brilliant album. Alan White's my drummer. Bass player has to be Chris Squire. He's an inventor of that style. He is a legend. He is missed. And not to say Billy Sherwood's not a great bass player because he is and a great singer, but Chris Squire is the original. The keyboards, that's hard. Most people would say Rick Wakeman. I'm not going to say Rick Wakeman because I think Rick Wakeman overplays. And some of his sounds that he gets out of his keyboards, some of those twiddly bits that he throws in are a little too much. And some of the sounds really don't sound right and contemporary. I'm actually going to go with this is a hard one. Tom Brislin as my keyboardist. Tom Brislin was never a member of Yes. He is currently the keyboardist in Kansas. He toured with Yes for one tour, their symphonic tour, but Brislin got the sounds right. He's a very dynamic player. Love Tom Brislin. He never did an album with Yes except for their live album with the orchestra. So that's bass, drums, keyboards. Guitar is hard because they had four guitars. They had Peter Banks, Steve Howe, Trevor Rabin, and Billy Sherwood play guitar. And I'm going to go with Steve Howe, even though when I first started listening to Yes, that was the 90215 stuff. I said, God, this guitarist is great. But Steve Howe doesn't play like Trevor Rabin. He doesn't play the flashy stuff. He never overplays. It's always tasteful. Occasionally, he'll do some distortion, which you hear in the last two albums, Married to the Sky and The Quest. And he does some kind of grungy stuff before this is before grunge on drama. But Steve Howe all day. And then finally, lead singer, and that's hard, but I will go with John Davison because he's pitch perfect all the time. Jon Anderson was a great singer, and he does some great work now. He toured with the Band Geeks. He had to tune the things down a step or two because he couldn't hit some of the notes. But John Davison's my singer. That
Oh,
being
very
said, what was that, Joe?
Looks like a very interesting lineup with some kind of classic members and some more obscure kind of choices.
That being said, John Anderson at the height of his power was fantastic. So it's I don't know, it's hard, which is why you asked the question.
Exactly. As I said, the hard hitting journalistic questions for Preston Fraser. Now, I know this is jogging way, way back, but if you can think of like your earliest, memories of Yes when you first started listening to them, what made you say at your kind of early listening so that this is a band that I want to follow throughout their career?
Looking back at my early lessons of Yes, I didn't say that. I said, God, this is really boring. I didn't get it. I did not get it, Joe. Now we're
Kind of similar
talking
to our
about.
friendship. I said the same thing when I first met you, but
Well,
you
see, I've changed
evolved.
now. I'm evolved. I'm less boring. I'm stale and moist, apparently. No, I didn't get Yes at all. And that was really around the when Close to the Edge came out. I was 9, so it wasn't Close to the Edge. It's probably around that time I started hearing about Yes and hearing Close to the Edge and hearing their Fragile album. I thought this is this overblown, pretentious English stuff. And then, like you mentioned, when we get to 90215, I thought, oh, wow, it's a nice band. Who are they? And it was, yes, different, almost the same band, except for a guitarist. Really, it was almost the same band as Close to the Edge. Well, back to keyboards. But then I thought, okay, this is interesting. And then as they progressed, and I saw the links between some of my favorite bands, and I know I'm mentioning Toto again, but when I knew about that link between Toto and Chris Squire, Toto and Billy Sherwood, Toto and Jon Anderson, because Jon Anderson appears on the seventh one, Toto album, called the seventh one. I thought I'll give him another listen. And surprised, like went to their back catalog and liked some of the stuff, including Close to the Edge and Relayer, especially, and then started going point forward with their work and started seeing them in concert.
I think I had a similar journey to you where I think when I first started, when MTV was just coming out, the 90215 album was probably my first introduction to them, which was a poppier, more radio friendly type of sound. And then when I went to explore their other stuff, I was thinking, I don't like this quite as, much. And it took a lot more listens to really appreciate the musicianship of both their earlier ones and also their later, works as well as I explored that a little bit, more. Now, I know this is your second book, the first one on the band Toto, and the second book on Yes, which is how you got the nickname Two Timing Fraser. But what have you kind of learned from writing, your first book and the second? So, how have you evolved as a writer? Do you think?
Am I supposed to answer that? No one will buy the first book.
Well, it's
All
different.
right.
See, it's like yes, you can still appreciate things as they evolve.
Yeah, the first this book is totally different than the first book. Oh, not well, it's different. Yes, indeed, A Tales of Yes without John Anderson is different than Toto the Band, Not the Dog, in that I wanted to focus a lot less on the individual songs and have more of a flow in the book. Because I felt that the Toto book was almost a list in a way, and it was done in a style which it wasn't done really in the narrative style. I wanted something which was a little bit easier to read. And that's interesting because Yes is a more difficult band to listen to than Toto. Toto's closer to pop. Some of it's pure pop. And I don't think there are really any, even Owner of a Lonely Heart is not pure pop. But I wanted a book which read easier for novices, but also has something for people who knew something about Yes. And that's a thin line because Yes fans are very particular. In fact, most Yes fans would say there is no Yes without John Anderson. The point of this book is to say, yeah, there's some good stuff here without John Anderson.
Well, wonderful. And, I would kind of view the difference between the book as I think you said the first book to me was definitely more of a track by track analysis. So kind of a deeper dive into each, track without going much into the history or the, lineup kind of changes in the band, whereas I think this one combines both the analysis and also some of the backstory that affected the music. So without being gossipy, it kind of told the story of the band in a way that affected the music kind of components of it, which I loved. And I think both books you should go out and buy. They make great little stocking stuffers for individuals. So definitely look those two up. Now, I know you have lots of musical interest, and is there any kind of journey that you're going to continue and evolve on with a third book?
Yes, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say it because you can hold me accountable for it. The next book will be on the band Living Color.
That's a surprise. I was actually going to think it was going to be Steely
Steely
Dan or
Dan.
maybe Chicago.
Ah, 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 ah.
You threw a
Steely
curveball at me, Preston
Dan,
Frazier.
yes.
So why
Steely
Living Color?
Dan. Well, I thought about Steely Dan. You know, I love Steely Dan. I've been writing about Steely Dan for what, 15, 20 years. But there are a number of good books about Steely Dan. There's some excellent books about Steely Dan. Like, yes, I thought I want to do something a little bit different. And there are no good books about Living Color. I'll say that out loud. There are no good books. So I'm going to write the first one about Living Color. And we'll get to Steely Dan, probably my sixth or seventh book. I also, yeah, Steely Dan's there, so I'll get to them. Um, Chicago, you mentioned. How many Chicago albums are there? They're like 40 some Chicago studio albums. And then they have like I don't know how many past members there are in Chicago. And I can only name two members of the current band. No, three. I, and I kind of lost, I shouldn't say this out loud. I lost my passion for Chicago 2 albums ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and in terms of why Living Color, then I know they have not probably had as much written about them as much, but why musically do you find them interesting?
They're black. That's not the only reason, but they're a black heavy metal band. They are pioneers. They're the musicianship um, is outstanding. They are five musicians, including the original bassist, five musicians who were at the top of the game before they joined the band and are still at the top of their game. They've had great album after great album. They have no bad albums. Now, you can say that Yes has no bad albums. That's kind of debatable. Toto has no bad albums. That's definitely debatable. Chicago's had bad albums. They've had no bad albums, and they're still out there. Vernon Reid just put out a new album. At the time this comes out, it'll be a new album out by Vernon Reid, and then the band has finished recording an album, which will be out, I think, late this year, early next year. So they're still out there touring and producing new music.
And I'm going to throw out a potential title for you just for consideration. You don't have to use it, but I would say that you should consider Living Color, the band, not the Wayans Brothers show.
I got to remember that. Thank you, Joe. I will work on that. But I'm going to get started on that probably in the winter and have it ready by this time next year.
Yeah. And maybe to wrap this up a little bit, going back to your book on Yes Indeed, what do what is like your favorite thing that you learned about the band in writing the book?
Yeah, that's a hard question. Did I learn something new that I didn't know about the band? What's my favorite thing is? My favorite thing is that even though at times they don't have a shared vision, it all works out in the wash and they go in the right direction. There was one album that I talk about in this book, which most people will be able to guess which album it is, which the band had a great vision together. They were all united. They brought in a great producer with a great track record, and the album sounded blah, and the songs were blah, and the album sold really well. But what I've learned is that when they have that, usually when they have that great vision together, or if they don't have the same vision together, it still kind of works out in a wash because one member of the band or two members of the band, or member of the band and the producer are able to move them in the right direction. The last two albums that has done, Mirror to the Sky and The Quest, and there'll be a new album out, I think, at the end of this year, early next year. Those albums had a band who didn't really record in the same room because it was COVID time, but they wrote together, and they had a producer, Steve Howe, who had a vision for where the album should go and strongly got it to go in that direction. And that's why those albums are great. And that's why some of the other albums aren't.
Oh, wonderful. Are there any other thoughts that you have on the band that you would like to share?
I want people to check out the albums I talked about, obviously, starting with Drama, going through Mirror to the Sky, all the non-John Anderson albums, and also the John Anderson albums. I did talk about any of the live albums that they've done of this configuration. I've actually, since Jay Shellen has taken over the drums, they haven't done any live albums, but they have a bunch of live albums with John Davison. Most of them are pretty good, especially Yes 50. So I would want people to check that out and go see them in concert. They're still touring. They've announced a tour for America for 2025. And like I said, they're working on an album which should be out late this year, 2020 or 2026. So check Yes out. It's a band I love. And I think most people will enjoy my perspective in the book. And I really appreciate you, Joe, as always. As I mentioned when we started this is episode 100. You have been a supporter of my podcast and my writing, the blogs, as well as the books. And I wouldn't have been inspired to even start writing if you hadn't written your books. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you for having me on the podcast, and I hope everyone checks out, Yes Indeed, Tales from Yes without Jon Anderson, and your previous book, Toto the Band, Not the Dog. They're both excellent reads on two legendary bands.
Thank you, Joe. See you.
See you. Thank you.